Everyone thought the tribal chief, Roman Reigns, the man who has carried WWE on his shoulders for decades, was gone for good, and was never coming back to WWE, until last night on SmackDown, when something unexpected, something shocking happened. Under the fluorescent backstage lights of Monday Night Raw, something unfolded that left the entire WWE universe in stunned silence. Just minutes after the cameras stopped rolling and most fans had filed out of the arena, a violent, deeply personal confrontation erupted behind closed doors, one that no one saw coming. Roman Reigns, the tribal chief, the head of the table, returned after weeks of mysterious absence. But what he did to Seth Rollins backstage was absolutely heartbreaking. Not just for Seth, not just for the superstars who witnessed it, but for anyone who still believed the Shield Brotherhood could ever be salvaged. It started with whispers. Whispers that something wasn't right. Camera operators began looking nervously at one another. Production assistants froze mid-stride. A loud, guttural yell echoed down the hall, one that was unmistakably Roman's. Then came the crash of steel, of flesh against concrete, of something beautiful dying once again. Roman didn't enter Raw through the ramp. He didn't want pyro, cheers, or a theme song. He walked in through the back, flanked by no one. No Usos. No Paul Heyman. No Jacob Fatu. Just Roman Reigns, eyes deadlocked, breath steady, fists clenched with the weight of every betrayal he had swallowed in silence. To the unsuspecting crew members working near Gorilla, he barely existed as a man. He moved like a force of nature, a storm dressed in tactical black, focused on one mission, confronting Seth Rollins. Seth was alone in the locker room, exhausted after a grueling match, lacing his boots, his forehead still wet from the fight. There were no security guards, no warnings, no chance to brace for what was coming. Roman Reigns stepped through the doorway like a ghost from the past. Seth's eyes widened, but before he could speak, before a word could be exchanged, Roman struck. A thunderous forearm collided with Seth's face, sending him sprawling across the metal benches. It wasn't just an attack. It was an exorcism. Years of betrayal, of manipulation, of silence screamed through Roman's fists. "You lied to me," he growled, slamming Seth against the locker door. "You stabbed me in the back and thought I wouldn't come for you?" Seth tried to fight back. But the rage in Roman's eyes was like nothing anyone had ever seen. He wasn't just avenging a grudge, he was burying a brotherhood. Camera footage, which has since been leaked in fragments by a production assistant too shaken to stay quiet, shows Roman lifting Seth and driving him spine-first into a stack of production crates. The thud was sickening. Seth gasped, clutching his ribs, eyes fluttering as he tried to get to his feet. But Roman wasn't done. He reached into his vest and pulled out something symbolic. A worn-down black armband, the one they all used to wear as the shield. He dangled it in front of Seth. "This meant something," Roman snarled. "You threw it away." And then, he dropped it. Before Seth could react, Roman hoisted him up for a devastating Samoan drop onto the cold concrete floor. A producer tried to step in. Roman shoved him aside like a rag doll. Security finally arrived, but not before Roman got in one final blow. A steel chair, brought crashing down across Seth's back, echoing through the corridors like a death knell for everything they once stood for. Seth lay motionless, curled against the wall. Blood trickled from his lip. Roman stood above him, heaving, chest rising and falling with fury, eyes locked on the man who once called him brother. "Tell your little faction, your little alliance with Heyman," he said quietly, "that the tribal chief never forgets. Never forgives." And with that, Roman walked away. No taunt. No smirk. Just silence. The hallway was frozen. Crew members were paralyzed, unsure whether to help or retreat. Medical staff rushed to Seth, who was barely responsive, wincing in agony, his breath shallow. He kept muttering under his breath, he's back," word spread like wildfire. Superstars in their dressing rooms dropped what they were doing. Becky Lynch reportedly sprinted down the hallway barefoot, screaming for medics. She dropped to her knees beside Seth, pushing the hair from his forehead, trying to keep him awake. "Stay with me," she begged. "Don't close your eyes. Stay with me, Seth." the locker room quickly divided. Some stared in shock. Some whispered that Seth had it coming. Others, especially those who had stood shoulder to shoulder with Roman in battle, couldn't believe what they'd just heard. Kevin Owens was overheard telling Sami Zayn, "He's not the same Roman anymore. He's something else entirely." Back in the control room, Paul Heyman watched the footage with trembling hands. He said nothing. He didn't flinch. But one crew member claims they saw him close his eyes slowly, as if confirming something he'd known all along. Roman Reigns was no longer the man who walked away from the bloodline. He was the man coming back for revenge. The footage was never meant to air. But WWE, sensing the magnitude of what had just occurred, began preparing an emergency cut of the segment for the WWE network. The boardroom was in chaos. Triple H demanded the clip be reviewed in full before anything went public. "If we release this," he said, "we don't just change a rivalry. We change the landscape of WWE." By sunrise, the internet was ablaze. Roman Reigns attacks Seth Rollins backstage trended worldwide. Fan forums lit up with theories, horror, excitement. Was this sanctioned? Was this personal? Was this the first strike in something far more dangerous? Doctors later confirmed that Seth suffered severe bruising to his back and rib cage, and a mild concussion. He would not be cleared to compete for several weeks. Becky Lynch cancelled upcoming appearances, staying by his side. When asked for comment, she simply said, "This isn't about wrestling anymore. This is about betrayal." But perhaps the most haunting detail came from a rookie backstage camera assistant, someone new, someone naive, who caught a final moment after the attack that wasn't supposed to be filmed. As Roman walked away into the darkness of the parking garage, he paused by a steel shutter. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a pair of black gloves, and slid them on. Then, with one final glance over his shoulder, he muttered just 2 words: "Round 1. That's when it became clear. Roman Reigns hadn't just returned. He had declared war, and Seth Rollins, bloodied and broken on a backstage floor, was only the first casualty. In the days that followed the attack, Raw and SmackDown were no longer just weekly shows, they were pressure cookers of silence, paranoia, and whispered warnings. Roman Reigns hadn't appeared on television yet, but his shadow stretched across every segment, every promo, every backstage corridor like a storm cloud. Seth Rollins was absent, his injuries forcing him into medical leave. But the footage had done the damage. The Shield's legacy, the brotherhood that defined an era, had shattered on cold concrete, and the echo of Roman's assault lingered far beyond what the camera captured. WWE headquarters scrambled for control. Official statements labeled the incident a personal dispute outside of scheduled programming, but no one bought it. Social media exploded with slow-motion breakdowns of the leaked video. Fans dissected the way Roman didn't flinch when Seth screamed. They noted how he walked away with no remorse. Podcasters debated endlessly: was it jealousy? Was it a message to Paul Heyman? Or was it something darker, something rooted in betrayal, in love, in identity? Because this wasn't just about Seth Rollins. This was about what the Shield represented, and what Roman believed was taken from him. Insiders began leaking strange details. A locker room assistant claimed Roman had been seen speaking to Jacob Fatu earlier that week. Another said Solo Sikoa had been eerily quiet, walking around backstage like he was waiting for orders. Someone else mentioned seeing Paul Heyman ducking into a production office with his phone to his ear, pacing, looking pale and shaken. "He knows what's coming," one talent reportedly said. "He just doesn't know when." And then there was Becky. She didn't leave Seth's side. Not when the doctors stitched up the cut over his eyebrow. Not when he cried out in his sleep. Not when he whispered Roman's name in confusion, again and again, like a man stuck in a dream he couldn't wake up from. She watched the footage over and over, trying to understand. She'd seen betrayal before. She'd watched alliances collapse, friendships dissolve. But never like this. Not from Roman. Not to them. When WWE cameras caught her arriving at the next Raw, dressed in all black, eyes hidden behind dark glasses, she said nothing to the media waiting outside. But inside, something was brewing. Bayley approached her in the locker room and tried to offer comfort. Becky just nodded once. "This isn't over," she said. "I'm not gonna let it be." Meanwhile, Roman remained silent. No tweets. No promos. No interviews. His absence was louder than words. The only communication came in the form of silence, and silence, when it comes from a man like Roman Reigns, is never empty. It's a threat. Then, the next Monday, everything changed. Raw opened like normal, until midway through the second hour, the broadcast cut suddenly to black and white security footage. No intro. No warning. Just grainy, timestamped surveillance showing the loading dock. A black SUV pulls up. Out steps Roman Reigns. Calm. Focused. Alone. He walks into the building. The camera cuts again, to a different feed. Roman, moving through the halls. Every person he passes turns away. Some nod. Some don't dare look. The commentary team goes dead silent. Michael Cole's voice breaks after a few moments. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've just been informed that Roman Reigns is here." And then, the final shot. Roman stands outside the locker room door labeled Rollins. He stares at it. No movement. No words. Just that chilling, silent stare. Then he turns and walks away. The broadcast returns to normal, but nothing feels normal after that. The arena is rattled. Fans don't know whether to cheer or boo. The air is heavy. The tribal chief has returned, but he's playing by new rules. Unwritten ones. Personal ones. Backstage, producers debate what to do. Some say Roman has gone rogue. Others believe it's all part of a longer plan, a calculated psychological dismantling of Seth Rollins from the inside out. Paul Heyman refuses to speak on the matter. When asked by Kayla Braxton whether he orchestrated Roman's return, he simply adjusts his tie and says, "When the head of the table speaks again, you'll know." But Roman isn't speaking, not yet. Instead, he's watching. Waiting. Lurking in hallways when cameras aren't rolling. Talking to no one. Leaving behind symbols, like the torn armband of the Shield found in the locker room of Damian Priest. Or the black gloves left on the commentary table after a segment ended. No one saw who placed them there. But everyone knew what it meant. And then came the voicemail. 3 days later, a mysterious audio clip surfaced on social media, just 15 seconds long. A low voice. Steady. Calm. "You took my bloodline. You took my family. You think you're safe behind Paul. But this isn't over. You started it, Seth. Now I'm gonna finish it." The voice was unmistakable. It was Roman. Fans were torn apart. One side called it justice. Another called it obsession. But both sides agreed on one thing: this wasn't the Roman Reigns who led the bloodline. This was something else. A darker version. A man possessed not by pride, but by grief, because what few remembered in that moment was that Roman Reigns never chose to walk away from Seth Rollins. He was forced to. Time, betrayal, and Paul Heyman's manipulation had fractured what was once unbreakable. But even broken things can still cut deep. And Roman, wounded for years in silence, was finally bleeding out loud. Triple H was reportedly livid backstage. This wasn't cleared. That footage wasn't scheduled. Who leaked it? But no one confessed. No one knew who was giving Roman these platforms. Or maybe they did, and they were too afraid to speak. And then Survivor Series was announced. The main event? Seth Rollins, if cleared by doctors, versus an unnamed opponent. The company refused to confirm it was Roman. But everyone knew. The match was already sold out. The WWE Universe waited with bated breath. Seth was still healing. His ribs were taped. He spoke once, in a dimly lit pre-recorded promo, where he looked directly into the camera, pain written across his face. "I thought I knew Roman. I thought we shared something sacred. I was wrong. You want war, Roman? Then come find me. But when you do, remember who taught you how to bleed. And just like that, the fire was back. Roman Reigns had tried to destroy Seth Rollins, but instead, he'd awakened something far more dangerous, the man who burned down the authority, who rebuilt himself from ashes, and who once cracked the Shield with a steel chair to the spine. This wasn't just a grudge match, this was retribution. Survivor Series weekend arrived like thunder on the horizon. Chicago's skies were gray, the air charged with tension. Fans poured into the arena with signs that read "Justice for Seth," "Believe in the Shield," and ominously, "Blood must answer blood." The buzz wasn't just about wrestling anymore. It was about vengeance. Legacy. Betrayal. The Shield wasn't just a faction, it was a promise. And Roman Reigns had shattered that promise backstage, in the dark, with fists full of rage. Now, Seth Rollins was walking into Survivor Series with broken ribs, a stitched brow, and a heart that felt more splintered than any bone in his body. Cameras cut to him walking into the building, head down, hood up. No Becky this time. No allies. No trainers flanking him. He wanted to walk in alone. And that silence, that self-imposed exile, said more than any promo could. Seth wasn't here to perform. He was here to survive. Meanwhile, Roman Reigns hadn't been seen all day. His name wasn't on the official card. His image wasn't on the posters. WWE kept playing coy, refusing to announce him as Seth's opponent. But backstage sources said otherwise. Security had been quietly doubled. Gorilla Position had a special camera crew standing by. And Paul Heyman? He'd been locked in a private room for over 3 hours. Triple H stood backstage with his arms crossed, watching everything unfold like a man who knew a line was about to be crossed, and couldn't stop it. Then the lights dropped. The main event slot opened with silence. No music. No fanfare. Just a ring bathed in pale light. Seth Rollins made his entrance slowly, the weight of the entire arena on his shoulders. The fans rose to their feet, not cheering, not booing, just stunned and reverent. His ribs were taped. His right eye slightly swollen. And yet, he raised one fist high into the air. Then came the noise. It wasn't a theme song, it was a siren. A long, slow, wailing siren over the speakers. One that sent chills down every spine. And then, darkness. On the Titantron, static. Grainy security cam footage. Roman Reigns walking through the same backstage hallway where he attacked Seth 3 weeks ago. But now, he was heading toward the ring. The crowd roared to life. A low hum began building under the sirens. Then the music dropped. Not his tribal chief theme. Not the Bloodline's battle drums. It was a slowed-down remix of the Shield's music. Roman Reigns stepped through the curtain wearing black combat pants, a tactical vest. No lei. No crown. No acknowledgement gesture. Just black gloves. And that stare. That empty, hollow stare. The announcers were silent. Corey Graves whispered, "He's not the tribal chief tonight. He's something else." Roman walked slowly to the ring, eyes locked on Seth. No pyro. No taunt. He stepped between the ropes, and for the first time in years, the two men who defined a generation stood face to face again. No Paul Heyman. No Jimmy Uso. No Solo Sikoa. Just Roman Reigns. And Seth freaking Rollins. The bell rang and Roman exploded. He drove Seth into the corner with the force of a truck. Body shots rained down. Headbutts. A knee to the ribs so sharp it made Seth drop instantly. Roman was surgical, targeting the exact injuries he had inflicted backstage. Every punch screamed a memory. Every kick roared a betrayal. He didn't want to win. He wanted to erase. Seth fought back, but it was desperate. Gasping. Flashes of old fire, dulled by pain. A sudden superkick. A sling blade. A quick burst of defiance. But Roman shut it down with a massive clothesline that turned Seth inside out. He stood over him, breathing heavy, sweat already pouring from his brow. Then he did something chilling. He reached into his vest and pulled out the armband, the old Shield armband. He held it up to Seth's face, and then tore it in half. The crowd gasped. Roman roared, "This is what you broke." Seth, barely conscious, whispered back, "No, you did." Roman's face twisted. Rage. Pain. Memory. And he snapped. He mounted Seth and began raining punches. Not wrestling punches, not scripted strikes, raw, ugly shots. Referees rushed in. So did agents. Jamie Noble. Finlay. But Roman wouldn't stop. The match was called. No bell. No winner. Just chaos. Seth Rollins lay unconscious. Blood soaked the tape around his ribs. Roman Reigns stood over him, shaking, fists red, chest heaving. Then, slowly, he looked at the hard camera, and for the first time in the entire build-up, he spoke, "Believe in me now." The screen cut to black. Backstage, the scene was pure panic. Becky Lynch had arrived late, only to be pulled aside by officials. She broke through anyway, racing toward Gorilla, screaming Seth's name. EMTs were already loading him onto a stretcher. Becky climbed into the ambulance beside him, tears streaming, shouting at officials to do something. But there was nothing to be done. Roman Reigns had made his statement and the war was far from over. Over the next 24 hours, the WWE universe fractured. Some called for Roman's suspension. Others called for his coronation. This is the real Roman, fans argued online. This is the man who carried this company, and now he's reminding everyone. But others weren't celebrating. They were warning, because what Roman Reigns did wasn't about glory or championship gold. It was personal. It was war, and war changes everything. The ambulance raced through the Chicago streets as the world outside kept turning, blissfully unaware that inside that vehicle, Seth Rollins was slipping in and out of consciousness. Beside him, Becky Lynch clutched his hand, knuckles white, eyes red and puffy. The medics kept their voices low but urgent. "Blood pressure's dropping," one said. "Possible internal bleeding," another muttered. But Becky didn't hear them. She was locked in her own nightmare, playing Roman's words over and over in her head, "Believe in me now." There was no belief left. Not in Roman. Not in the brotherhood they once shared. That night, under the bright hospital lights, Becky stood over Seth's bed as doctors wheeled him in for emergency imaging. She turned to a producer who had followed them, breathless, holding his phone out. "Turn that thing off," she snapped. "This isn't a storyline." The producer lowered his phone slowly. "They're asking if you'll cut a promo tonight." Just a response. 30 seconds. "We can control the narrative." Becky didn't blink. "Control this," she whispered. And then she walked away. Back at the arena, chaos reigned. Fans were still chanting. Chants that mixed awe and horror. "Thank you, Roman," clashed with, "You sick bastard." The commentary team was reeling. Corey Graves tried to frame it as a wake-up call to the locker room. Michael Cole couldn't hide the tremble in his voice. "I've been calling this man's matches for a decade," he said, "but I've never seen him like this." Triple H stood at Gorilla, fists clenched, looking at the monitor like it had just shown him something he couldn't unsee. A producer approached with the latest clip, fan-recorded footage showing Roman pacing in the parking lot post-match, talking to himself. Muttering things like, "He had it coming, he picked Heyman over me, and most chillingly, if he dies, he dies." The video was pulled immediately from WWE's social media queue. But it was too late. Fans had already shared it. Within an hour, #RomanSnapped was trending at #1 worldwide. TMZ was already running headlines. Roman Reigns loses control. Is WWE locker room safe? The Washington Post even published a story, "When wrestling becomes too real." The psychology behind the tribal chief's meltdown. Meanwhile, Roman Reigns had disappeared. No one saw him leave the arena. No security footage caught him exiting the building. One referee claimed they saw him walking through a service tunnel near the boiler room. Another swore he left through the back of a catering truck. Rumors swirled that he had driven straight to Florida. Others said he was holed up in a Chicago hotel room watching the fallout unfold like a general surveying the battlefield. In truth, Roman wasn't hiding. He was waiting. 3 days passed with no word from him. No tweets. No appearances. No acknowledgement of the chaos he'd caused. Seth remained hospitalized. WWE issued a short statement. Seth Rollins suffered multiple injuries at Survivor Series and is undergoing further medical evaluation. No mention of Roman. No mention of the match being stopped. Internally, however, meetings turned brutal. Some top executives wanted to suspend him indefinitely. Others believed they could harness this moment, turn it into the biggest storyline since the Attitude Era and Paul Heyman. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to, because by Thursday, it became clear, Roman Reigns was back. And he wasn't waiting for anyone's permission. At exactly 11 a.m., WWE received a direct video upload from an unknown IP. It contained a message from Roman Reigns. Raw. Unedited. And censored. He was standing in the middle of an empty warehouse, somewhere cold. You could see his breath in the air. I told you I wasn't finished, he said, his voice quiet. I told you the Shield was never dead. It was just bleeding out. And now? I'm the only one left. He looked straight into the camera, eyes calm. Still. Empty. Seth made a choice. He let Heyman inside his head. He turned his back on the brotherhood that made him. So I reminded him what it means to bleed. I reminded him who I am. He took a step forward. This isn't about titles. This isn't about WrestleMania. This is about history. Brotherhood. Blood. He held up the torn Shield armband. I will not stop until everyone who abandoned this family feels what I felt. I will not stop until the Shield is reborn. My way. Then he paused. Tell John, tell Ambrose. I'm coming. And the video cut out. In that instant, the entire wrestling world froze. The name John hadn't been spoken on WWE programming in years. The implication hit like a freight train. Roman Reigns wasn't just at war with Seth, he was hunting Dean Ambrose. The implications were terrifying. Because if Roman was going down this path, it meant no one was safe. Not Seth. Not Becky. Not Paul Heyman. Not even Jon Moxley, who was now thriving in AEW. Insiders started talking. The Young Bucks hinted on Twitter that old ghosts were knocking. Renee Paquette, John's wife, posted a single tweet, "Don't." Fans speculated wildly. Was WWE working with AEW? Was Jon Moxley returning? Or had Roman gone completely off the rails, blurring fiction and reality to the point of no return? Meanwhile, back at the hospital, Seth Rollins began to recover. Slowly. Quietly. But he didn't speak to the press. Not yet. Becky Lynch finally broke her silence with a chilling message on Raw. She stood in the center of the ring, no music, no pyro, no catchphrases. I watched my husband cough up blood in an ambulance, she said. I watched doctors cut his gear off because he couldn't breathe. I watched him ask me, did I deserve it? And I didn't know what to say. Her voice broke. I don't care if you're the head of the table, the tribal chief, or the devil himself. Roman Reigns, you crossed a line. And I swear on everything I've got left, you're going to regret it. The crowd roared. But the roar felt hollow. It was the roar of people who knew they were watching a tragedy unfold in real time. The next week, Roman returned to SmackDown. He walked out with no music again. No lights. Just him, dragging a steel chair down the ramp behind him. He entered the ring and sat in the center, staring into the camera for 90 full seconds without speaking. Then he said,